Welcome to The First Turn. I'm your host, Hyena, and today, Llama and I are talking about This Week in Warhammer. If you like what you hear, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, or let us know if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. Alright, let's get to it. Welcome to The First Turn. I'm Hyena.
I'm Llama.
Today we're talking about some Warhammer stuff, again, and plus other stuff, I think. There's other things I want to talk about, now that I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
Things that are still tabletop related, but not Warhammer.
Because we don't know anything else.
Go figure. So we've got a little bit of news this week. Pretty light week. It's mostly been focused on Underworlds, which is getting a new edition. Mm-hmm. The new box set is called Ember Guard,
which is the setting, right?
Yep. So it's always a setting. It's always some place. Ember Guard, I think, is a city. I think.
Makes sense.
Kind of in the ongoing narrative of AOS, there's humans, city versus Skaven uprising kind of thing, and I think Ember Guard is kind of where they're clashing. I can't remember if this was one of the cities that got destroyed or it was a new one. I don't remember the precise details. I just know it's kind of in that area.
I know someone did a meme where they took the girl from the Eremagerd and put it with Ember Guard.
That was really funny. I like that. That was funny.
It was like her face on the...
Yeah. Speaking of memes, I saw a funny one. We were talking about Lord of the Rings earlier. I saw a really funny one that it's maybe not be funny because I'm only explaining what it is. But in the Lord of the Rings movies, they didn't do a really great job of explaining kind of the situation of the wood elves, right?
Yep.
And one of the existing elven ring bearers, Galadriel, meets with Frodo in the movie, obviously, and is like, "Oh, to be a ring bearer is to be alone, to be, And then they never elaborated though, but there's a guy there. When they first get to the place, they're like, he's like, "Oh, where is Gandalf? I would very much like to speak with him." Mm-hmm. And that guy,
Celeborn,
that's Galadriel's husband.
Yeah.
And so the funny bit is it's like, he's standing right there when she's talking to Frodo.
Yep.
And she's like, "To be a ring bearer is to be alone." And it like flashes over to him and he's like, "Oh, I'm right here." And she goes, "Completely and totally alone."
Yep.
It's just like, damn, that was cool. But they don't make that clear in the movie that they are in any way related.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
They have relations.
Yeah.
But it's not clear.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that they had to do in the films that you really can't do in a book is like, there are times when they had to trim fat to keep the story like about the same thing.
Right.
And whereas in the...
But it could have been as simple as them just like holding hands when they were going somewhere. That would have gotten the point across. You know what I mean?
And it's what's interesting is their relationship in Tolkien's lore is weird because Galadriel, of course, is very old from stuff in the First Age and before, and she doesn't meet Celeborn until some millennia later. And then when they get married in the Tolkien lore, they get married, but they are apart from each other for like 500 years.
That's so
not
weird.
Even living in the same place. So I don't know what elven marriages are like in Tolkien lore, but it might just be a ceremonial thing, or it binds them in another dimension or something. But like, here I think she was just like, "Oh, it's you." Yeah.
So I thought that was really funny. So it's like, damn, that's cold right in front of him.
Yep. His friend-zoned husband. Yeah.
Yeah, we were actually talking about Lord of the Rings a lot. Still great. I think it's about time for me to go do another binge rewatch.
Yep.
Just because it's a yearly tradition,
Yep. And say what you will about the Rings of Power, it doesn't diminish the greatness that was Peter Jackson's first trilogy and Tolkien's book.
Neither did The Hobbit. The Hobbit didn't diminish it.
No.
There were parts of it I liked. I think it was way too long. They ran into a problem where they did too much of the material.
Correct.
As opposed to Lord of the Rings that made some executive changes to cut some of the unnecessary material. To make it tighter. Hobbit just went wide.
Yeah.
They didn't trim any of the fat. They added more fat.
And part of it...
In the form of like adding Legolas to the story for some reason, adding weird romances that didn't exist in the story. All that. It was...
They tried to pull from the same time period in the appendices to include like the White Council meeting, which really doesn't do anything for the Hobbit story. It was 40 minutes of Gandalf and Galadriel mentally texting one another to talk about the Lord of the Rings stuff that we already know.
Which is just strange.
And to try and tell you, look, Saruman's starting to turn. But all the stuff they inserted in there, and it wasn't even like Pete's fault. he wasn't the original director on it. They had a whole different vision going with Guillermo, and then I always hear, by the way, What We Do in the Shadows version of the word Guillermo.
Guillermo.
And like, but when that fell through, when the timeline didn't match up to his other commitments, they had to beg Peter to come in, and so Peter didn't get to do what he did with Lord of the Rings, where he storyboarded it for like 6 years before they even rolled film, and so he came in and literally improvised it from day one to the end. And then they told him partway through production, when he got sick and had to leave for months, by the way, we're actually going to stretch this to 3 films instead of 2. Because I'm on board with 2 films for The Hobbit, because I don't think you put The Desolation of Smaug and The Battle of the Five Armies in the same film.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, but those would have been good pausing spots.
Correct.
Right? Making it stop where it did, and adding this whole extra thing of dwarfs versus orcs, and and then the weird...
the dragon sickness was awful to watch. Yeah.
And then Legolas's beef with the white orc, like, oh my God, it's just, oh my God, it was just so... It was too much.
And then when they had Galadriel go Super Saiyan to fight Sauron, like all of that was unnecessary. Like there were moments in the Hobbit films that were really good, and if they would have cut those down, they could have had excellent.
I liked the
films.
Actors.
Yep.
I liked Martin Freeman as Bilbo. Yep. Like I thought that was really good. 20 minutes of dwarf singing and throwing CG dishes, not necessary.
Nope. Especially like. Inserting all the songs from Tolkien lore would have been rough anyway. When they did the somber song about our long-forgotten home, excellent. When they sang What Bilbo Baggins Hates and flicked dishes around the room, that was stupid.
Yeah, I loved the Misty Mountain. Right, like that was awesome. I got goosebumps during that. It was great, but like I just rolling my eyes so hard watching the CG, because it was clear that it was like these are not real dishes even.
No,
they're flying in parallel lines across the screen, like
when they're hitting them with their elbows and like and
they're just like, and there's no shadows. It's just really bad post production. Just oh man, it was so bad.
Yeah, it was like a 70s UFO.
But how did this get onto to the Hobbit movies? That's discussion for another time. Completely different. But yeah, so anyway, we got Underworlds going, new season, different format going forward. So it sounds like, which I'm on board for, cutting the amount of stuff that's coming in the boxes, maybe helping them be a little cheaper,
right? Or
at least preventing them from going up in price. Like me as a collector of models, all that paper, all the cards and stuff was really kind of waste anyway. It was clutter.
And a giant box that you then had to figure out what to do with. And if you weren't interested in like terrain or like you said, all the cards, you're now sitting with all this stuff, but it feels like a waste to throw away. So you just hang on to it somewhere.
And so while the prices of the warbands might not decrease, hopefully this prevents them from going up anymore.
Well, and I think the single purchase of warbands, whether you play Underworlds or you play Age of Sigmar, or you're just one of those painters who wants to knock out really cool. The price of a single warband is tolerable.
Right.
Because you're getting like anywhere from 3 to 6 character models for like $50. And most people were fine with that. Mm-hmm. But when it was like, well, the only way we can get these 2 for now is in this $180 box set where I get a bunch of other stuff I don't need. And if you don't have someone to split that with, you're just eating it.
And so they're going to do a 2-player starter box, which I think is more like 100 and 110, 120, somewhere in there. Still a lot. Splitting it more manageable. And this might be the last one they do. That's what they were saying. They're going to stop doing the 2-player starter, start doing, at least for the rest of the season, single-player boxes, basically. So each individual warband comes separate, which is how they do it now with some of them, but there's always a 2-player. And we know of 4... The next 4 plus, there's 2 mystery ones coming that they have slated already. We got to see some of those leaked, which I think caused them to have to reveal them.
Yep.
As well as one other Phoenix Lord that we'll talk about in a second. But there were some leaked photos that went around that were from some of the rumor engines that were kind of solved because of it. But we've got both the Skaven and Stormcast from the story, plus there will be like a Plague Bearer warband for Nurgle, plus a Seraphim warband of Saurus warriors, and a great looking reimagination redo of Gorok, the Great White Lizard.
Yep.
The Eternity Warden? No, it wasn't the Eternity Warden. What was he? I don't remember. He was like a super temple guard.
Yeah.
He was like the protector of the Slan spawning pools or something. It's probably not Gorok.
And what was the city he was in charge of?
Oxyotl? Something like that?
Yeah, one of the real big ones. I know in Total War, it's a single city settlement, and it's great.
Yeah.
But
But Gorok was a great character, and this one looks very much like him without being him, probably. He's probably not the same named character.
No.
It'd be a little weird if they did that. They're kind of not doing that much. Even though I feel like Seraphim would be one of those ones where they could totally pull it off. Because a lot of the Seraphim existence is like dream magic of remembrance.
Yep.
Where the Slans like remember the Saurus into being. And then then they become living, and then they procreate.
And even then, though, I mean, a lot of time has passed, and so they really only carried over Croak, which I'm fine with. I like tipping the hat to the old while giving them new faces. So
exactly.
And then the Nurgle one, while it's plague bears, they're full of character. So I'll be getting it.
The one literally has a pot belly, which is really funny.
Yep. And they gave him a neat little story for it. And so they pour a lot of creativity into these Underworlds warbands, and so I think those are good for whether you play, like I said, whether you play the game or you just collect that faction. So release them as individual faction packs. I'm on board with, but
it's more the list building though.
That change is changing.
Is how the cards are going to work, how your objectives work, how your upgrades work, things like that for the game. There are these now pre-con decks that you just pick one for each. For whatever army you play, you pick one that you think you can utilize the best and play with that. There's no more like, hey, buy every single warband so you can get specific individual cards from each one, and then you can build your like perfect optimal deck out of. Like that was such a huge turnoff with when it first came out. Because it's like, well, I have to go get the chosen axes for 2 of their cards. I don't want to collect
right because the cards aren't sold separately. Yeah.
They only came with the warband, so you were spending $40 for 2 cards, and then you had a bunch of models you didn't need or want.
And 38 other cards you didn't need.
Exactly.
Or whatever. And they tried to like remedy that where they would do like season packs where you could buy a pack of cards. I think they maybe just thought that was cumbersome, and so they're going to try this way. Now, for those who are familiar with the old version of playing Underworlds, that's still going to exist in a form.
I mean, you could
call it the Nemesis, whatever. So you can still do the deck building, but this new one where it's like, well, we're going to have these pre-con decks by season,
right?
And you pick one that you want to play with to go with your faction.
Now, I think it's smart naming that type of play style something, because it makes it official. You could have just taken whatever cards you wanted to, playing with your play group, and just built your own deck. Even now, anyway,
yes,
even if they didn't have a
Yep.
format called Nemesis, it's like, hey, just bring 40 cards that you want, and we'll just play it this way as like a fun way to play the game. You could totally do that, but now it's like an actual format that will be represented at like a convention,
like Magic the Gathering, where you have all these different formats. You make them official, and then people feel a little.
And so
better
I think
about
it's smart to do it that way because it's also not necessary. If people want to try really hard and get really sweaty about it, they can go play Nemesis.
Yep.
And it kind of pulls some of the people that want to do that out of this this pre-con kind of more constructed sort of format.
Well, and it almost makes me want to try it. The fact that it's like, well, you don't list build with your models because you pick a faction pack, that's what you get, and now you're not going to have to deck build. You're going to pick a deck you like or the style you want, and then give it a shot. The game, from what I remember, was already pretty quick. Activation based. You're on a grid map, and the games were quick. And so I don't know. I might even give it a shot just because. The smaller skirmish games are a lot easier when you're not playing a lot to pick up and play.
Right. That's what we say about Spearhead being so good. It's no list building, no decision making, just play. Pick it up and play.
Yep. Yeah, whereas if you're playing a lot, it's a lot, the big 2,000-point games, while still fun, when you're playing a lot, that's better for that. Your reps give you that endurance and that tactical. These smaller ones, you don't have to play games very often or have time, and then you can jump in and just do it, which I like. And again, the Underworlds models always look spectacular.
And while they do always look good, they're not the best models.
Nope.
Because we just had Stormcast come out this weekend, and good gravy. I had to pick up a bunch.
Yeah, the AOS proper Stormcast are insane.
They look amazing.
Yeah.
So I picked up a handful, mostly the characters. The new Lord Relictor, which the old Skeletor from the starter box. Edition 1. Edition 1. Yeah. He got redone. Purely aesthetic, though. Like his rules have not changed at all. From getting a new model, they didn't change at all. Same with the Lord Celestin on foot. They have a bunch of different weapon options now. You got like a glaive and a sword and shield. You have 2 weapons.
It's the Primaris Lieutenant of the Stormcast.
But they're all just weapons of legend,
Yeah.
and he is just the same no matter what he's equipped with. So it's a purely aesthetic one. In case you needed that character, you can get it now. Because it's hard to get before because you only had the one celebratory hand in the air kind of guy before. Now you have this one. And then I got the new Knight Azeros / Tornus the Redeemed.
Which I didn't think of it when we first had it spoiled to us months ago, but he may end up a Model of the Year candidate.
Yeah.
And the reason I say it is because not only is it so damn cool looking, but it is wildly popular. There are content creators, especially all over like Instagram and whatnot, who are posting that they bought it even though they, have never played Age of Sigmar, had no interest in Stormcast, or they hated them on principle for some reason. But this wave of models for them looks so good that you even have 40K players who are like ho-humming about what they got versus what this looks like.
Yeah.
And people are buying...
Think about when both Dark Angels and Blood Angels got their updates. It was around the time that Stormcast and AOS was getting updates, and it's like, oh man, I don't think they won. Like, while some of the Dark Angel stuff looks really cool. I love the Inner Circle Brethren. Oh, they're amazing. But like the new Terminators are like, okay, they're just Terminators.
Well, the
new Knights are like, okay, well
that's just it. It's like when you've seen Space Marines, it's like, oh, they're crisper, slightly more detailed Space Marines.
Right.
And then it was like they really pushed. I think now that they knew what they wanted Stormcast to look like, and they just went right past it into pushing it. That Knight Azeros in particular is just such a fantastic centerpiece model, despite not being centerpiece size.
Because he's little. He's not huge.
He's on a 50 mil base, but he's detail-wise, he's almost perfect. He's a painter's dream because everything's open and accessible, but also highly detailed, so you can really... And even painting styles that we don't normally like Katarzyna Gorska, took her style on this model and made it worked perfect because of his flow, and he's got magical energy coming off his feathers, and
then
he's got
glow effects and weird spectral energies and stuff. They all work.
And I've seen people converting it for 40K. I've seen people converting it to Chaos Guide. Like someone made a Nurgle thing with it, and it's like the model is just. It might end up one of those where it isn't a huge $100 plus centerpiece that wins Model of the Year. It might end up one of those like Abaddon kind of where it wins Model of the Year, because I just think it's a home run.
Gaz? Did Gaz win Model of the Year?
Gaz won, yeah.
He's huge, though.
He's
not $100 model,
no,
but he's a huge model.
Yeah,
so.
he's pretty big.
But yeah, this guy is phenomenal. Same with the Griffin guy.
Yep.
What's the named one called? Iridan the Watcher. Big like smoky axe and plume on the back. Very interesting kit to put together, by the way, because it was not doable in subassembly.
Okay.
You can't do it in subassembly because the rider is like kind of tucked under the eagle's wings. You'd have to like paint the wings separate, paint the rider separate, paint the eagle separate, and then put the rider on, and then put the wings on afterwards, because the wings kind of like they clamp down the rider's legs to the model.
They're tucked.
They're like tucked underneath. And same with his like cloak. His cloak flows behind him. Him, her, they, whatever. There was a bit of lore that people were confused about because they call him the Watcher was just they. It's
they don't know what
very androgynous.
Yeah.
You don't know their origin. Don't know anything about them. They're just mysterious. So it's a they.
Yep. Well, and so you made a build choice to kind of represent that.
I did. So I liked the idea of having partially from rules perspective, because I think the generic one on the Griff is not great. He just doesn't fill a role that Stormcast need, but the Watcher is amazing. The Watcher is very, very good, but the model itself lends itself to be like some minor modifications to make it work. Especially with like the hood. The hood has like a Stormcast helmet tucked inside of it that you can kind of see the face, but it's a face mask. You can't see the person's face. You don't know what they are. I just decided to leave that piece out, and so it's just an empty hood for mine. And I think it adds kind of an eerie sort of.
Well, even like the Watchers in Dark Angels, those little faceless hooded,
those little demons that they consort with.
Yep.
Yeah, those guys. Just very confusing. My Night Haunt, all my Grimghast Reapers and my like Blade Geist Revenants and stuff. I left all the faceplates out of all of those models. There's no faces in any of them. They're just ghostly hoods with because they're all the Reapers in the name. You know what I mean? You don't see the Grim Reaper's face in most things. You don't see like the skeleton face. You see the empty black hood.
Yep.
It's like that's more eerie and creepy in my mind. And so this person having this, I'm going to paint it such that you won't be able to see the face, and it'll just be eerie. But model wise, I think it was superior than the generic. Even though the generic one's glaive is one of the coolest Stormcast weapons they've ever sculpted, because it's like it's not that like dual-sided blade that they normally have, where it's tapered on both ends.
Right.
It's like cleaver kind of thing, where it's like flat on the back, angled down to one edge. You know, it's I don't know. It's like a big one-edged sword. What do they call that? A
Volge or I don't know.
A little bit, a little bit like, because it is still a polearm. It's just a really cool looking weapon, and I need to figure out who I'm going to put that on, because I need to use that.
Yeah, it's great when they give you extra cool parts like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then I got my commemorative model Sorcerer, 1 of 7, for the collection.
Yep.
Which I thought was interesting, because Slaves of Darkness is getting an update here next, and I know people are complaining that like this guy's base size doesn't make sense for
he's on a 40
Sorcerer lore, because the current one is only on a 32 mil base, and he's so much bigger that it's like I would feel bad using this guy in a game because he's just so much. He's not the right size. All that. I'm like, I'm thinking. I mean, you're making some pretty big assumptions that the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, the previous one, that ugly like pincer-headed guy, isn't just going away. And this is the new size for the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, which I'm 100% that's the case.
Yep.
Because there's another one coming out that isn't a commemorative character
coming
series,
with the book,
named Underworld Warband, whatever. That's coming with the book. That's just generic Sorcerer Lord, who's going to be on a 40 mil base to replace that other one. Yeah. That other one, I don't think ever even fit in the army.
Nope.
Aesthetically. Even when it first came out, it didn't fit the army. It felt so much more like a Tzeentch sorcerer.
Disciples of Tzeentch, yeah.
Absolutely. It was like a Tzeentch sorcerer. Like has a robe, it has a staff. There's no Chaos Warrior there. I mean, look at how the aesthetic of like Chaos Space Marine librarians and sorcerers look compared to Space Marines. Well, they're just Space Marines with extra parts and extra weapons and extra stabs and stuff. They're still fully clad in armor. They don't just like shrivel up into little old men. And then, like, I'm a Space Marine. You know, like they're giant. You know, still
they still can fight just like a Space Marine.
Exactly. Which playing Space Marine 2, I'm getting towards the end of that campaign. By the way, you start seeing a little bit of that, and god dang, some of the boss fights are. Whew, I'll get to that later. That's rough. Spoilers, full of spoilers, by the way. So don't listen to that part if you don't want.
If there's any of you out there who haven't already beaten the campaign.
Exactly. Right. I'm really far behind. But so like this guy feels very much like he fits in with a Chaos Warrior aesthetic.
And I think they said they wanted him to feel like that. So Chaos Warriors, at least in the mortal realms, they've separated it from what they used to be in the old world. And a lot of them are that. When they become Chaos Warriors, they are usually seeking the approval, not necessarily of the gods, but of like their lord or whatever. But they might be gifted by the gods with various things. Some of those gifts include like a mutation. Some of those gifts include physical stature, but other ones they become magicians. But they're still, like you said, they're still a Chaos Warrior.
Right.
And so even though he's a little less bulky, maybe, not really.
Not really though. He has like skirt leggings now instead of just like full plate.
Because he doesn't need the armor. He's always got magic to get him out of trouble.
They put a cape on the back of him to cover up some of him. Yeah. Right? Like some of it's hidden, but I think it's still there.
And I also think he's clearly taller than a human. Yeah. And I also think the 40 mil is a part of just what they're doing game standard wise for characters a lot of times.
Well, most characters now will not fit on a 32 in terms of like containing their model silhouette,
their footprint,
their footprint. Whereas the 40 definitely, I mean, like most models now fill up the base that they're on, as opposed to overhanging it, like they used to. Chaos Warriors before were too big for 28 mil rectangles that they used to be on, or 30 mil rectangles, whatever they were. They're just kind of trying to upscale some of the bases to better fit the model.
And GW has always leaned a little bit in recent years on the bases being bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a couple examples. The Mega Boss on foot for Iron Jaws when he first came out. He is a squat little guy. I mean, he's huge, but he's a squat guy. They put him on like a 100 mil base. It's like, or an 80.
It was an 80. Yeah.
It's like, why is he on an 80? Well, they came out with a commemorative one. They came out with another one. They came out with a couple more Mega Bosses, and now they're on like 50 or 60. And it's like, that's so much more appropriate.
Yeah.
80 mil base for that original guy. It's like, what? Why?
You went too big there. Well, because I've seen a lot of other games that I mean, Privateer Press was an example. This on Warmachine. Yeah. They always made the base like one size too small, and
it was one size fits all. So no matter what was designed, if you're a heavy jack, you're on a 50 mil.
Right, and so they would design this model that was a great big hulking, overhanging, tip over all the time thing on a base that was too small. Whereas GW is getting better about standardizing their base sizes for gameplay, but they always would rather it's got a wider base, so it doesn't tip over. Makes it easier to get into combat with things if that's what you need it to do. And I think it looks a little more polished when it's just a touch bigger. Yeah. It also gives the hobbyist more room to build little scenes or texture that they want on there. So yeah, I think this is good. I think when you're talking Stormcast or Chaos Warrior characters on foot,
it feels appropriate.
A 40 mil fits.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so those were great. I mean, I might get some of the models later because I came with the Griff Riders, who are just not very good. The models, it was a weird choice.
So wait, which ones are the Paladors, which I've seen in tournament lists?
The Paladors are the Ranger ones, the ones with the crossbows.
They don't ride bird dogs.
They do ride bird dogs.
They do ride bird dogs. But those are old bird dogs.
There was the original bird dogs.
Got it.
The one you like, remember you wanted to paint one?
Yeah.
That kit is a Palador. Coming units of 3.
And they're keeping that.
And they're keeping it, at least for now.
Yeah.
They're in the book. They're in the new
Got
Battletome. So the difference is, like a lot of the old stuff, the Paladins that are still play legal, the Judicators that are still play legal for now, are not in the Battletome anymore.
Correct.
So
because next year they're gone.
They're not keeping them because they're not staying. So they've all been put into not Legends, but a battle pack for Stormcast that are all self-contained to be gotten rid of at the same time. But the Paladors do what those kind of heavy griffs do, but they do it already and they do it better because they have movement shenanigans. They hit harder. The shock hand axe version of them is already damage 2. They're +1 damage on the charge with like 3 attacks. It's like that's insanely high damage.
Knights.
Well, these new Knights riding griffs are 3 attacks at 1 damage +1 damage on the charge. So their damage isn't even as high as the existing kit. What do they get? If any warrior chamber unit has died this battle, they get to reroll their charges. That's all they get. It's like, man, you know what? That's not enough. And I'll tell you why. The Paladors get to run and shoot and charge and retreat for free. Like they get to do all of that. Retreat, run, shoot, and charge all in the same turn. That's just straight up better.
That's, yeah.
The same number of wounds at the same kind of saves.
It was what they had to adjust about Night Haunt.
Right.
Because they all...
And so it's like, I don't see what the purpose of these new ones are. Because they're not replacing the old ones. They're not better than the old ones. They're not more durable. They're not faster. They're not...
Are they part of the same chamber, technically?
They're all still Warrior Chamber, I believe. Gotcha. Because like the Rangers are... They might have an extra keyword. The Rangers might still be Warrior Chamber, though. You might not be able to look because it's Battletome locked.
Oh, but, I haven't bought that Battletome. I don't know if I'll buy everyone this edition.
Yeah, I know. It's a little rough. But it's like just out of the box, just raw stat wise, the Powders are just better. I don't know what the new one's intention is, what their role is, what their purpose is. Powders with hand axes, 14-inch move, so they're fast. They all have 3-up saves. They all have 5 wounds. Right, The shock index is 2 damage at two swings, but plus 1 damage on the charge. So I guess the new ones are 3 damage, or 3 damage without charging, 6 damage with charging.
Whoa.
These ones are 4 damage without charging, 6 damage with charging. Right. So it still equals the same amount of damage, even though these are better because you don't rely.
And both are groups of 3.
You don't have to rely on charging. They're both units of 3.
Okay.
I mean, maybe points are different. I can't remember what they're called. Are they in here already? Stormstrike Paladors. So the new ones are called Stormstrike Paladors. The other ones are called Vanguard Paladors. The Vanguard Paladors have the Vanguard Chamber, so they're not Warrior Chamber. That's one of the other. So they've got a bunch of chambers, right?
Yeah.
It's still super confusing. You have the newest one, which is the Desolation. No, what is it called? Oh my god.
We've talked about it a lot.
You're supposed to know.
So let's try to make it easier for the listeners out there who maybe are interested in Stormcast because they're so popular. How can they avoid this confusion?
Right. So
when you have bird dogs, other bird dogs, dog birds.
There are different thematic groups of models, right? And they were released at different times, and they represent these different chambers of like, call them waves of reinforcements, right? Each wave of reinforcements has a different keyword, right? So the original Stormcast that came out were all Warrior Chamber, right? They were your normal soldiery sort of guys. Then you had the more rangery guys come out. And they are
They had the capes and the crossbows and the
all of that, and they had these. They were scouts, and they had movement shenanigans and stuff. That was the Vanguard Chamber. They would go out ahead of the army and scout the wilds before the armies would get there. Because before they used to just roll in heavy with just like lightning in.
Yep.
But now they need to scout a little bit. Then you had the Sacrosanct Chamber, which was the wizards. Where they got wizard reinforcements. The wizards are going away.
Correct.
The wizards technically don't even have the Sacrosanct Chamber anymore. Currently, they only have Warrior Chamber. So they got rid of that. All that synergy with that already is gone, I'm pretty sure. Or that's the intention.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was AOS 2.2.
Yeah, that was the starter box for that versus Nightholland. Then you had the Extremis Chamber. That might have been
AOS 3.
Shit. No. So you had the Dragon Riders, the Dragon Cavalry, which might have been before 2.0.
Right.
So it was the Rangers and the Dragon Riders were kind of similar timing. But then the new dragons that came out last edition are Extremis Chamber.
Yep.
The Star Drake is Extremis Chamber. Like there's a lot of dragons that are all part of Extremis. And then they came out with the Thunderstrike guys, which nothing has Thunderstrike anymore.
They just moved them to other things, yeah.
And then you now have the Ruination Chamber, which are like the Stormcast that are very old veteran Stormcast that have been reforged a bunch of times. And they've got their own like special abilities that are all for those that are losing it, right? Because they don't give a shit anymore, I guess. So they just like shrug off abilities. Yep. Enemies casting on, they're like, nah, I ain't got time for that. On a 4-up, I just ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing.
So they'll barring what is going away, there will be 4 active chambers. You'll have Extremis,
Vanguard,
Warrior,
and then Ruination.
And this one, yeah.
That should be all of them. Done.
Mm-hmm.
The new ones are Warrior Chamber. The new ones are 210. They have a champion, a musician, and a battle standard in the unit. The Rangers one, the Vanguards, do not have a musician or a banner, which matters. They do not have Warrior Chamber, they have Vanguard Chamber, and they are 10 points more. So the new ones are a little bit cheaper than the existing ones. But then they have some extra bonuses of, better rallies and better control, things like that. But they're slower, they don't hit as hard, and they don't have like the movement shenanigans. I don't. It's just it's a weird choice to release that when the army doesn't need it.
Yeah, and
because they do a very similar thing to the Dragon Riders, the Extremis ones, the like the Fulminators, for example. That's the charging centric Dragon Riders, the unit of 2. They are just as tanky. They're units of 2 guys. They've still got 5 wounds apiece. They're very similar. Bonus damage on the charge. They've got dragon attacks. Like it's all just so samey, that it's like it was a weird choice to release. I don't think they have a purpose right now. I don't need them because they just I probably wouldn't play them over any of the other ones. So I didn't pick any up, even though I do like them. I like the look of them.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a bummer in my mind.
Well, so some things change and some things don't. And like with Stormcast, it's like they've always made a new sort of liberator.
Yeah.
With each version.
This time they actually made
a new actual liberator
yes.
instead of just a functional liberator.
Who are now Ruination Chamber instead of Warrior. That might be an addition to Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a weird thing if they kept Warrior,
but to hear that, like with bird dogs and with dragons or whatever, it's like, well, no, they've got these are the same, slightly different, but not even different role.
Let me read here.
Just like a couple of different.
Nope. Liberators are still Warrior Chamber. They are not Ruination. Even though they came out in the newest box set, they are not.
They're still classic
Liberators.
Liberators.
They're still Warriors.
They're still the newest Stormcasts.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
I hope that wasn't too confusing if you've never played before.
Yeah.
It is confusing. That's the thing. Is there's so many keywords you have to like find your synergies and stuff. But that's why Stormcast I think is a hard army to crack in terms of like making an effective one, because you kind of have to lean into.
It's a hard army to solve. Even
you've got to lean into the synergies and see what what you like, because some things are just not objectively better than others. It's a lot of like, well, these are very similar to one another. Which one do I like the best? Which one looks the coolest?
Yep. There's that, and like with Magic the Gathering of all things, which I was talking about with somebody not too long ago. There are these design elements where they're trying to reward synergy, but you're always going to have the type of players who like ignore synergy at the get-go and look for best in slot.
Right.
So if you think like Diablo 2, the video game. So now I've just talked about 3 games in the same sentence.
Yep.
Bear with me.
It all come together.
When you were building like the optimal character to go on these runs in Diablo 2, there really weren't, in the early days of the game, there weren't sets and there weren't runes and a lot of that stuff. You just went for best item in slot, and that's how you optimized your guy, and then you went and played.
Your storm shields, your Shakos, your string of years.
Right. Ring of Jordan and
those
like
kind of items that like make you survivable. You can survive.
And so you went for best in slot. And then it was like, well, then they started with these seasons in Diablo 3, and then they went back and patched some of Diablo 2 to have some similar elements, where it was like, well, each season we're going to make these new synergized item packages. Now, there will still be some items that maybe your best in slot's still better, but if you have 3 out of 5 from this set, you can...
Well, I'll tell you this, too, as a little secret, is with the enchanting and everything in that game, you can get specific enchantments that reduce the number of set items required to get your bonuses by 1 or 2. So you can you can still get your set bonuses, which is what you're really looking for, but still get some of those individual best in slot items.
Especially if you hit a high roll on one. And then in the Diablo 4, I haven't done any of the multiplayer yet to know, but I'm sure there's something similar. Well, in Magic the Gathering, there's been a similar thing where we've seen, if in standard environment at least, which is coming back, it was like, well, you used to build your deck, and let's say you were playing a 2-colored, a blue-black, you would pick just like, well, what are the best cards in these 2 colors, and that's what I'll play. But now they design certain synergies where the individual cards on their own might not seem like they'd be great.
Right.
But all of a sudden, when you're playing this strategy, they work really well.
You get tribal synergies. You get, your snow-covered package. You now get snow-covered lands all do something.
You get multiple things that trigger off each other when something enters play or leaves play or whatever. And so you're rewarded with advantage and tempo based by keeping these synergy packages together. And so best in slot doesn't necessarily work as well. I think in Age of Sigmar...
it does. I mean, Shieldred.
It still can.
Just start out there. You play in black, you play Shieldred. Yeah. You play Ragavan.
But now, but now she's a 2 of in the sideboard, and not a 4 of in the main deck. Yep. And so it's in Age of Sigmar. I think we see it even more than 40K, where it's like you can kind of try to build your list best in slot, but like, man, they make some of these synergies tempting enough that it's like you can stick some of these models together and really be rewarded for it. But that also is like harder to play to a degree.
So, well, it's because we were at a tournament yesterday at our local store for 40K, and the game I was watching resulted in a victory in one person's favor. But then they were talking at the end. It's like, oh man, if I didn't forget to draw my secondary objectives on turn 2, and I would have killed this unit, and this unit could have done this and stuff, and I remember this to do this, the game would have been swung 10 points in the direction. I would have won instead. It's like, yep.
But you didn't.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is where it's like, yeah, you're right. What's your point? You lost this one.
Yeah.
That's part of the point of the game. Is it's like under the perfect circumstances, the list doesn't play itself. You play it. You are the one piloting it. And so you need to remember all of your rules, and you remember when the best time to use your abilities are, and don't forget to do your things.
And I also think
that's what makes a good player.
I also think that's why practice ends up more important than all the talking and theory crafting, like because you get that "oh man, if only" syndrome, and like you're right, if but you didn't.
But you didn't. That's part of the point of playing the game. Is it's like, you forgot to use your ability. You forgot you had this thing in your pocket that you could use. You forgot to draw your objectives, which is insane.
Or you even made a decision without like forethought, without thinking what could happen on the crackback, and like I think the synergies like that, like reward the general, and so and this is another topic we could talk about. We could spend a whole episode talking about it. But I think there's a level of player in any game who's interested in the competitive side of a game, but where they get stuck at this like
middling, this
plateau middle spot where they're good, but getting to that next part, they think comes down to luck, or my opponent got lucky, or I got unlucky, and it's there's a reason why you're there and they're up at the top, and it's because of the practice and understanding. Always know how to play to your outs. Because that sort of stuff, to forget that is like, well, that you wouldn't have if you'd have practiced that.
Yeah.
And if you just wouldn't have, if you would have thought outside of the list wins, not the player, or we'll see tournament results come in for a 40K event, an AOS event, a Magic event, a Star Wars event, and people, the average, that middling player will go, what list won?
I'm going to play that list. We were talking about that last week too.
Yeah.
We're talking about net listing and how certain factions don't hit the top because the net list isn't available yet. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's like, well, what list is winning tournaments? I'm going to build that one and play that one. And it's like, okay, well, if you were a good player, you could learn how to use it with practice and learn what the winning person did and what their decision making was, and use that list to the same effect. But it doesn't always work like that.
No.
You might play a list a very specific way, and you build a different thing. If you were in control of it, then your agency was taken out, and you were given this list to play. It's like playing, when you're trying to help someone else practice for a tournament, and you're playing the meta lists. Well, you might not play that list to optimal effect because it's not your style.
Yep.
You don't know what it's supposed to be doing, what sneaky thing or what interesting thing it's supposed to be doing to win the games. Like,
especially if you're just setting up and playing like it's a game,
right?
Because then you're not practicing correctly. Like one of the things, at least when I was doing tournament Magic, that I would do is, instead of us both showing up with our homebrew and playing, which teaches us nothing,
which is useless information, by the way.
Yeah, it doesn't.
If you come up
anything.
with a weird meta breaking list, and someone else shows up with a weird meta breaking list, and you fight against each other with weird meta breaking lists, you don't learn anything about how those lists will do against the meta.
Correct. And so it was one of you always had to decide, you're just going to be the sacrificial dummy here, and you're going to play the net list. And what we would try to do, at least when we practiced, and I know in Warhammer it's harder because the games are so much longer and you have to bring all these models and setting up takes forever. But the philosophy at least was like, okay, I'm testing this thing I want to play. So you are going to play this net list that I want to play against. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk through your net list plays all the way through to make sure the net list plays optimally, so I can find out how my deck handles each situation or what decisions I need to change. And that ended up so effective in preparation that I'd go to a big event and like get in that situation, and then I would always assume my opponent's going to play optimally when they're playing that deck, once I recognize that's what they're playing. And in Warhammer, it was like the same with practice. It was like, well, you two both just showed up with rogue lists, and you showed up
rogue lists. I like that.
You showed up with rogue lists because they're like, yes, other people are playing that army, but you guys have this tech or this module that you've put in, and you're trying to make a metagame call, but you're playing both your rogue metagame call lists against each other, and then, win or lose, you then make a radical decision about how to change your list.
Because it didn't work against another rogue list.
Yeah. And you think you're going to run into it in the tournament you're going to that's got 90 people in it or whatever. It's like, that's not effective. And then you tweak it, and then you go into the event and lose.
Because now you're not rogue anymore. You're not counter meta. Now you just have a bad list.
Yeah. and it's just like you beat your head against the wall. That said, there is always value in reps, because then you are better at not forgetting stuff. But I think to be rewarded by some of these synergies that the game designers put in, even because they do now think about tournament play, you want to get reps in and not just assume the list is what's going to win it for you. Are there egregious moments in any game where a list is too good and it does win?
100%.
Of course. Like very beginning of 10th, Eldari as printed just rolled most armies.
Yeah, you could randomly choose 2,000 points and just win games because their stats were too high.
Yep.
That's all it was.
And it was in every phase too. It was like, well, they move too fast, they deploy too well, they shoot too well, they fight too well, they get out of dodge too well.
The best shooting, and they got the best shooting, the best weapons. Plus, they have psychic powers that make their shooting and weapons better. It's like, jeez. It's like, I have a gun that's good against everything, every single target in the game because it's strength 20, mortal wounds. It's like, oh my god.
And they move like before and after they do stuff, and so they're just always out of trouble. Yep. They get to initiate every fight.
But they were low toughness. Yeah, but not if you can't hit them.
Right.
It's just like, oh my god.
And they always got to dictate the combat. Like, because of their movement, it was, well, they got to decide when the fight happens.
Yeah. Well, they shot at me. I should be able to shoot at them, right? No, they're out of your range.
Yep.
It's like, oh my god, everything.
And so, yes, that happens. But most of the time, it's like, I think all these game design companies have reached a point because of how much information gets shared so quickly that they have to put more in the general's hands. And this can sound however it sounds to people, but I think that exposed a lot of players who maybe preferred the list autopiloting for them. Now,
Fifth Ed Grey Knights, World or Corn Berserkers.
Yep.
You know, those kind of situations where it's like, I cannot hurt this army.
Nope.
7 out of 8 top 8s are Grey Knights. Yeah. That's a problem. Yep. You know, like it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, and the poor one other guy lost immediately in the quarterfinal round, by the way. So then it was 7th Ed Demons in Warhammer Fantasy, written by the same guy, by the way.
Yep.
So
turn 1, double your points. It's like, oh my god, so dumb.
Well, 7th Ed Fantasy Demons was written by the same guy who wrote the 5th Ed 40K Grey Knights.
Same thing, right?
No, that demon army was just...
No, that was Undead. Sorry, Undead turn 1, Nagash, double your points.
It was like 200 zombies turn 1 or whatever. Yeah. And it was, the demons were just, all their infantry had ward save, or whatever they called them back then, the equivalent of an invulnerable save. They were all cheaper than yours. They all moved faster than yours. They all fought better than yours. It was
still a ward save.
It might have been, yeah. And so they just, he just overwrote them like he did the Grey Knights.
Yeah.
But point being, that does happen, but like, we're in an era where they're a lot more careful about a list itself just winning. And so... Like, are there problem things no matter who's piloting them? Sure.
Every point update, every faction update, they target those lists that are too good.
Right.
The specific lists, not the armies, the lists that
and
are
so
too
you
good.
As the player, it's incumbent upon you to, like, learn your synergies, learn how to maximize them in the game, know what your weaknesses are, and, like, if you aren't willing to do that, then you have to expect you're going to always... And then if you don't learn anything from it, you're going to just like blame luck or whatever at the end. I don't know. I don't know how to help them.
Yeah.
All of that is to say, the synergies in the houses, the chambers of Stormcast.
Yeah.
They've got them down to 4 now.
Yeah. But it's funny because you can use them all. If you build a list that included all of them, you could still use them all, which actually might be effective because most of those abilities are once per turn per army.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you've got 4 different chambers present, you can use all 4 of their abilities. If you have 1 chamber present, you only use 1 ability across your whole army. So there might be, again, some trade-off for going wide. It might see some trade-off for going tight.
Yeah, going tall instead of wide.
Exactly.
And I've seen, we don't know, I don't know how valid it was, but like I've seen some people who are taking the risk and buying more regiments in an army. We saw one that it was only a 3-round event, but it went 3-0 Maggot Kingdom Nurgle, and it went with 5 regiments.
Well, and so the large number of regiments only really matters for the first turn.
Yep.
If you plan your game plan is to I'm going to go top of 1, then
or decide who goes in one.
It doesn't matter how many regiments you have.
Yeah.
You go a lot of regiments because it's like, my opponent's going to deploy before me. I know that already. I'll out deploy them and deploy slow, out deploy them, assume I'm going first, and then make that my game plan.
Yeah.
Because if they double turn me, they're sacrificing primary objective or secondary objectives. They're giving me the chance to double up the next turn, or I just stay ahead because I let it go turn order after they double me.
Mm-hmm.
And doubling is not that good anymore. There's so many negatives to it that it's like,
well, and
I almost wouldn't prefer not to do it.
What I've noticed in some of the reps we've got is there are people who for years just got so used to, addicted to even, dare I say, well, I just went bottom and I rolled and got the win. I got to go again. They got so used to that they still think it's cake. And then it was like, well, yeah, but now you only scored 3 points this turn because you couldn't max out,
or 6 or 7, whatever it is. And then, but you give up the 5 points for secondary.
Yeah,
that's massive. That's a huge point.
Yeah,
swing.
and then it was really easy for me after to, even with fewer units left, to max out and score 10. Yeah. And it's like that ends up so much of a bigger deal than it used to. But people are just locked in, and we've said this before. Some of that is Games Workshop's fault. They made the game both their games so much about just killing things that a lot of people still are in that mindset. Like, oh man, I get to go twice in a row. I'm going to do that and kill other things, and it just doesn't end up that rewarding in the end, even if it's fun to kill stuff.
Yeah.
And like you said, if you build your army because you want to do these 5 regiments. And that's usually the case because you really want to play 5 different heroes that have to have their own.
Yep.
That can't, when it's not one of those like underling heroes that can be bought in a regiment.
Which I think there should be, design element wise, there should be some heroes that cannot be leaders that have to be brought with another hero. For Stormcast, as another example, anything that's a knight level character, who's a lieutenant basically, shouldn't be able to lead their own regiment. They should have to have a lord level thing with them, and then they are the auxiliary thing brought along.
Yeah, like Slaves to Darkness does that a bit, where there's these like underling heroes, where if you buy a lord level hero,
you can bring an aspiring champion.
Yep.
It's like,
or the Orgroid Theridin,
Myrmidon. The aspiring
yeah.
champion can be a leader,
He
but it can also be the other thing.
Yep.
And if there was more of that, then you could have more heroes being brought in the army without having to have more regiments, which I think would be a positive, honestly.
But like you said, you have to game plan for that. If you build your list with 5 regiments and you still deploy and play as though you're banking on going bottom of 1, top of 2, like you're just going to be disappointed over and over again. You're going to think the game's broken and not that you did something wrong.
Yeah. Like I said, with our 3-round tournament we played, I went top of 1, got double turned every single game, and still won all 3 games. Pretty high score. Mm-hmm. So just throw it out there. Plan for it.
One of the ones when I lost to the Skaven player, it was because he made that choice to not double turn when the score was close. Because he sat there and I was at like up by 2 at the turn round, and he's like, well, if I go, I can like get out of this combat I don't want to be in and go over here. But he's like, but then I can only max out at 6 points, and then you might get 10 next turn, and all of a sudden you're still up. And it's like, so he then opted out of it and was able to like max score. He was able to use the Vermin Lord doing its like jump around the world thing, and so it's so like it was a good design choice. Like if they were going to keep the double turn in, they had to do something like this, because there is still a time when you want to do that.
Yep.
I think there's a desperation mode, or you've left a battle tactic remaining where you want to kill a thing.
I feel like you would do it if there's no battle tactic that's great, that you can't achieve one this turn, then you'd do it. If you're up by enough points that sacrificing your battle tactic isn't going to matter, then you
can do it.
Like there are times where it's like, yeah, do it, press the advantage, but it's usually when you're already ahead, or it's a Hail Mary, right?
Yep.
It's not like this is just the optimal play every time it happens.
Well, and it's no longer alpha. The game is not alpha strikey enough to do it, to just do it on that bottom of 1, top of 2 anymore. Especially because so many of the battle tactics you can't even score in the first turn, because a lot of them require you to be like mid-board with 2 units or whatever, or you're in the other person's deployment zone. All these things you're just not going to get. Yeah, that's for sure. So this morphed weirdly into we were talking about news, and now it's like how to prepare maybe.
Yeah. News. We were talking about the news.
Oh yeah.
There's other news. There are a couple other games we were talking about that received some news. One of which you mentioned earlier, Privateer Press's Warmachine.
Steamforged, yeah.
It was purchased by Steamforged Games, and good gravy. We looked at their website.
Yeah.
They have released so much stuff very, very quickly. Whole factions for that game that I just didn't know were coming, and they're completely out now. Pretty wild. So if you haven't checked out, not a sponsor, any Warmachine stuff recently, go check it out. It's pretty interesting.
Well, and you know what we liked several years ago at Gen Con when they were announcing Mark IV, and we looked at the models in the case, and they did it. Now they did like the psychological thing of you get a good studio painter to make them look that good. Yeah. But it was effective because we bought some starter packs. Now those starter packs are immediately no longer available. They changed the format. But when Mark IV came out, Privateer didn't launch much. You got a couple of faction boxes, and then it just like stuck.
And it was like a year later. We went to multiple conventions. And it was like, this is the same stuff. There's nothing new. But then Steamforged took over, and it's like, I don't know if Privateer Press was sitting on a bunch of stuff, if they had the designs but they didn't have the means to produce it, if it was going too slowly, how they wanted to do it by 3D printing it all, and
right.
I don't know what the deal was, but when Steamforged took over, they're like, you got all these designs, we're releasing all of it immediately.
Well, and so they're like kind of doing away with the metal, it looks like, and they were going to this new resiny plastic thing in 3D print. And that one of our buddies was looking into it a little bit farther, and that's how we like also went to the website. We're like, holy cow, look at all this stuff. Yeah. And it was kind of unannounced.
Well, the whole Crix faction is released.
Yeah, and it was. That was what he had read somewhere. Was it was like, well, they were sitting on all these designs for these factions, both old and new. They were all new designs. I just mean some of the factions were existing ones and some are brand new. But P3 was, of course, struggling, I guess, financially, and they just, to get these into production or whoever they had negotiated the printing with, so they were sitting on all these files and never got around to releasing them. And when Steamforged bought it, they just saw all this and were like, oh,
yeah, just
release it.
Make it all. Yeah. Release it all now. And
I think they look good. Yeah. So good, in fact, that a game that I've never been that interested in, it was like, I might pick up a faction pack and just like...
I was thinking, I might get some.
Because they like proportionally, and with that material being so much better than metal, it was like, I might get some.
Yeah, because I've got a few things, but it's like, I kind of want to get some more just because it's all available now, and I didn't realize that.
So quickly, yeah. And you know, not awful price for considering the scale of the game.
I want to see what the rules are going to be, if they're going to make rules changes, because there were some flaws with the rules set for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't know about playing the game, but
right. You know,
the models,
you can't try.
The models, so there was that, and then there was some stuff from Infinity maker Corvus Belli. They were doing. They have a new starter set coming out now for Infinity, the sand trap.
Like on a golf course?
Something like that. Something. New starter box. But they are also making that fantasy version called Warcrow. And I honestly didn't think they would be releasing anything anytime soon for that game, because it's a secondary game, and Corvus Belli's release schedule for Infinity is very slow.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh man, a secondary,
and Warcrow sat around
secondary game in the same by the same company. It's going to come really slow, if at all. But they a month after it was, because it was released at Gen Con, I think, is when the first time it became available. Gen Con was in August.
Yeah.
So here we got 2 months later, they're already releasing new stuff for it. Just like, good on you. Well done. Good. Keep it coming out, because
there were some people in the store playing it.
Yeah, if your game is going to survive, you need to get stuff out.
Yeah.
You need to expand beyond the starter box, which is very limited, a little expensive. The game is going to be expensive, but that's war games now.
That's miniatures. Yeah.
That's just how it is now. But the models look good. I might get some of those too. So there's a lot of stuff upcoming that I'm looking forward to picking up. And I think there was another game that was releasing something new, and I can't remember what it is now, that has something that I wanted. I don't know, but it's a good time to be a modeler, a good time to be a painter. I have a lot of projects I still need to work on already that I don't need new ones.
Well, and speaking of good looking, so we had talked about the Golden Demon results in the weeks prior, and now they've been showing off the commended, the people who were in the trophy consideration that didn't make it. Because we forget there's the
there were a lot of good ones.
There's notable and there's finalist pin, but that next level right before commended, and that's when you are in the trophy discussion. And any of those, you see why they're commended. Any of those could have won a trophy. Like, for all the discussion we already had about people's criticism, it's like, I do not envy the decisions those judges had to make, because so many good pieces.
And this is the era. This is the section of it, of the decision making, where you're like, they might have made the wrong choice.
Sure.
This is the only time that you would see that.
Yeah.
But that's because any of these were in contention for the top three.
Any of them were so good.
You know.
And the only thing we're missing as casual observers is we're just getting a picture and not holding them, and you know, but yeah, they're showing these off. I love that they give them that credit and put them on their website. Yeah. That like, here's this other stuff that was great,
and they say, here's the model, here's the photos of it, here's who did it, here's their handles, go look them up.
Yeah.
And they still give them that credit. They still give you a referral to your
pre-advertising,
social media, whatever. Yeah, it's great. It sucks that it takes how many weeks for it to get out, the articles, but because a lot of the interest has kind of died down a little bit after the competition's over, but it's still there, and you're still published online, and people can search you and find you. Like,
and I've seen the commended people who then post once Warhammer Community has theirs on there, and they end up excited for it. Like any bittersweet sort of feelings they may have about not getting a trophy, they kind of are like, they still published me though. Like they still took that professional photo of my thing. And
they still spent money in time of some of their studio people taking the photos and writing the article and building the editing and whatever. They did all that effort that they didn't need to do.
Yeah.
You know,
for a commended entry, and so they still get that shout out. They still get love. So when you had those, like we had talked about, the sort of naysayers, you're like, oh, they got done dirty, these really great pieces. It's like, no, they still got their props. And while everybody can't win, it's like you still win a little bit. And most of those people I've seen have been pretty ecstatic that they got that stuff published. And then again, you look at those paint jobs and it's like, man, so much good stuff. But speaking of good looking, we had leaked and thus teased the new Phoenix Lord coming out.
Yes, which we saved here to the end, and then we'll wrap up with some Space Marine 2, and then we'll be good to go after that. Sure. But the old chicken fried chicken Kentucky Fugue chicken. I don't know. The old Fugue is out in full display. Yep. Who is the Phoenix Lord for the
Fire Dragons?
The Melta.
Which I'm gonna say here, I'm gonna admonish myself. I had assumed, because we got the Striking Scorpions kill team, that the next one we would see is Karandras, and that's because when they've updated the aspects in plastic, they've usually then given us that Phoenix Lord.
So I wonder if this is just an order of operations thing where like both are in the works. I would not be surprised. We're gonna get both.
Because Eldar haven't even gotten their codex yet.
Yeah. But this one got leaked before a Karandras did. I'd still not be surprised if we get Karandras.
No, it could be.
I don't think we're ruled out from that. Because we got some other Phoenix Lords kind of close together, and some of those characters close.
We had the Howling Banshees and Jane Czar, and then we had the Dark Reapers and Magan Ra.
We had Lilith, and the Lilith could come out at one
point.
And
Incubi.
And the Incubi with
Drazar.
Yeah. So all those kind of characters kind of came out together. Who's the Howling Banshee one?
Jane Czar.
That's Jane Czar.
Yeah.
And then she was versus Drazar.
Drazar.
Lilith was out kind of by herself.
Yep.
And then okay. So
and then the last wave of Eldar, they got a bunch of updates to their Rangers. Yeah. And then the Avatar, and then they got the Dark Reapers and Magan Ra.
Yeah. I would not be surprised at all though if we still get both.
Like they released the Striking Scorpions 40K proper with Karandras, and then we get new Fire Dragons and Magan Ra. Like, wouldn't be surprised. Because they've been trying to update all the aspects.
I would see the even though the Striking Scorpions are released in Kill Team, I don't think the Fire Dragons are released in Kill Team. I think they'll just be a kit.
Correct. Yeah.
They'll just be a regular kit for that. But that's nice to see that they, are still putting forth that effort to update those models.
Yep.
Because like Eldar got a lot recently.
And I think
in recent years
they did. And I think it was after they did the Jane Czar that they specifically said on Warcom, like they want to update all of the aspects. And so I wouldn't have been surprised if they've had these CADs for a while. Now, what I love, I think, about this Fugen, however he's pronounced.
Fuggin,
that Fuggin Phoenix Lord, is this is another one of those after the debacle that was Inquisitor Cotias, where GW has given a glow up to these old classic characters, and it's so good. Because I'm talking,
it still feels like the same
right.
character.
You look at Abaddon. You look at people who had issues with typhus, but typhus. You had Fabius Bile. You had Azrael. You had Dante. You had Mephiston. You had and so on, where they gave an update to these characters, and it still looks and feels exactly like that character, but proper scale, proper detail, and then this one is one of the best ones. It was like, oh man, everybody looked at that and was like, oh, this is 100% him,
100%.
and it just looks great. Yeah.
Whereas again with Kotiaz, we were like, who's that?
Yeah, I was like, is this generic Inquisitor with big pants?
It was not obvious.
Yeah.
Like they changed too many of the classic design.
Correct. That's
elements.
the issue.
I mean, maybe Kotiaz looked like that in his old model.
Maybe he did.
But he had the big shoulder pad, fur cloak that kind of covered some of it up. That kind of hid his shape.
Yeah.
Then he pulls off the cloak and he's got, bell bottoms and tiny shoulders.
Maybe.
Yeah. Like...
Yep.
Who knows? But yes, this one, in the spirit of the model, definitely captures.
Just perfect, really. So. And even the pose, they've got him in a very
classic.
It would seem like classic or static, but yet it still looks dynamic because the details are great.
Yeah.
And he's got that legendary fire pike thing of his. So
the 12-foot long melter rifle and his
that he somehow hip shots with,
and his giant axe.
Yep.
Shark tooth axe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was a good one. And the heavy metal team did a really good job painting it. They did on those fins on his helmet. They did an orangey red to black gradient that looks good. Weird that his tabard was also a red, but a different red. But that's just it. I'm excited to see painters get a hold of it because, again, when it's that open-faced model where the details aren't hard to get to, people crush it.
Yep.
So that's super exciting. That'd be one, by the way, Games Workshop, that if you wanted to send us early, I wouldn't be upset.
I'd paint the shit out of that.
I'd paint the shit out of that. Nashville Hot, I think, is what I'd go for.
Yeah. I do like me some Nashville Hot chicken.
I mean, those wings are pretty good.
Yeah. Just all of it. I could eat, though.
I could eat some chicken.
Well, that was delicious.
Delicious.
Anyway, so we've heard talk about Space Marine 2.
Space Marine 2.
The game is not incredibly long.
No.
I'll throw that out there. But neither was Space Marine. It's a lot of fun. It is so hard. I'm playing on a hard difficulty, but it's hard.
It is hard.
Even for that. It's learning the mechanics is tough. It's not a shooting game. It's very much a melee game, in my opinion.
Yep.
And so you got to get the timings down for that crap.
Because you have to get the timings down for the perfect parries and all that. Yeah.
It's how you survive. You survive by perfect parrying small enemies to restore your temporary health, and by counterattacking the bigger enemies so you could execute them. That's how you win the game.
Yeah.
That's how you win. Except when it's just things like a Carnifex, which Carnifex is nice.
Yeah.
God damn it. I got to a point where you're kind of storming a place, spoilers, where you're storming like a citadel, and you fight. It was like 40 warriors in a row where you're holding off outside of this door, and then you fight 2 zoanthropes, and then immediately after 2 zoanthropes.
And the zoanthropes are assholes,
yes,
by the way.
Are. And immediately after fighting the zoanthropes, you fight a Carnifex. It's like, oh my god! And then I killed that Carnifex. I'm like, all right, it's over. Another Carnifex.
Yep.
And I'm like, God damn it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I saw 4 more Carnifexes climb over the wall, I'm like, all right, something's going on here. It was part of the story.
Yeah.
So it kind of cuts there and the story progresses. But you, spoilers, I mean, you see in the trailer, you're fighting Tzeentch. But even like the Tzeentch guys are woof.
Mm-hmm.
The Rubric Marines themselves are a little tough. The Terminators are dicks.
Mm-hmm.
The Terminators are tough. I fought my first melee Rubric Marines. Those guys were rough to fight. When you fight the named bad guy, Chaos Sorcerer.
Yeah.
That fight was insane too. But it was so much fun. But that led us to what we were talking about earlier with him being a Chaos Space Marine in addition to being a sorcerer. He's not just a sorcerer.
No.
He's still a Space Marine. So
Yep.
he was an ass kicker. I've gotten to the point where I'm almost done because I'm getting to the final stretch. I'm on this burial planet. they call it. But what else do you bury people in? Tombs. So would you say it's a world of them?
A
world of tombs. You could call it a tomb world.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And so I've gotten to this part where because there's like 6 different factions that are competing with one another, right? You got the Space Marines trying to fight everything off. You got the Astral Militarum that are defending the planets. You got the Admech who are being very cagey and doing weird shit. You have your Tyranids who are invading. That's the primary threat. You've got your Zinchi cultists who are doing stuff,
seeking the technology.
Now even maybe a 6th thing that you're going down into this tomb world to deal with. I don't know if you actually experience anything with this 6th faction, but maybe. I've descended. I was riding an elevator for 38 minutes before as part of a cutscene. So we'll see. But I'm on the final stretch of that game, and it is a lot of fun. I've done a handful of the side missions. There's only 7 available. But they're available in 5 different difficulties, and they're replayable like crazy. But you kind of want to commit to one specific class, so you can advance that class, so you can get upgrades, so you can play the harder difficulties.
Yeah.
I think the game has a lot of room for expansion within that arena.
Correct.
Of making the multiplayer bigger. But most of the other games that were in the Warhammer universe that were this style, your Vermintides and your Dark Tide and stuff like that, they had a very limited pool of maps to play through. And every expansion they had a couple more, and so there wasn't much to play with in those games either. So it's like only having 7's like, well, that stinks. There should be more. It's still at least decently replayable.
Yeah. Well, and so it's funny is when they first expanded operation, they added an operation map, and then they increased a difficulty level. So when that first happened, it was deemed like so difficult that it was unfun. That people were like, you have to just grind to beat it. It's funny is watching those same people then go the other way when the developers then came in and ticked the difficulty down a bit from where it was. Now, those people who did beat it under the original ultra hard are complaining because there was a unique item that you could unlock. They're now griping that anyone who's gotten it since should be forced to give it back,
right?
Because they didn't have to beat a version as hard as they did,
right? I mean, I can see giving the people that did it the first way around an extra
some reward,
maybe.
Yeah,
you were the first ones to beat it. Here's an extra little thing,
a virtual reward that can never be traded for.
It's a shoulder pad that looks exactly like the regular shoulder pad, except it's got some scratches on it. Like, it doesn't even look cool.
No.
It's just the symbol that it represents of I did this when it was really hard. You don't deserve to have it because you didn't. It's like, get over yourself.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
It's a not real thing, and it's not worth any money. Jesus. Like, what do you...
This isn't competitive. You can't sell it. You can't... You don't hit a leaderboard or anything. There's nothing.
There's no Hall of Fame you're being inducted into. Jesus. Now... credit to those people who did beat that. Yeah. So it was like when in Diablo 3, I think it was, when they first launched the Inferno difficulty, it was called. Now, they eventually went on to do your Torment levels and all that were really hard. Yeah.
But Inferno difficulty...
That first Inferno version of it, Inferno difficulty, was so insanely difficult. A buddy of ours was one of the first 5 to legitimately beat it on record, that first Torment. It was almost unbeatable. And then they scaled it way back so that it could be beatable.
Well, they scaled it way back, and then they increased the number of Torment levels.
Correct.
So it's like, on Torments now there's like 10 of them.
Yep.
Or 15 of them. And so Torment 15 might have been as hard as the original Torment was.
Yeah. And then they changed it to be like grindier difficult instead of just straight up you one-shot die all the time difficult. So anyway,
they started doing the rifts and then the seasons,
but then they kept giving you new gear that got better, and
it was. What I did not care for though with that, it was like you get a unique item at level 35, but then there was a level 60 version of it, or when it drops for you, it scales whatever level you are. I hate that.
Yeah,
I hate that. But there was like,
so you're not even going to keep it very long.
Here's level 35 legendary, not even legendary. It's not unique. Give me the gold back. I don't like the orange. Give me the gold.
Right.
Anyway, here's level 35 version of it. Here's the level 60 version of it. Oh, but then you can roll a higher rarity version of the legendary called a...
I don't know what they call them.
something else, where it's got a golden border on it instead. So it's the same thing but better stats. And then you can roll it with that, and then the other thing, and then a perfect one. So it's got guaranteed to have max stats of all the kinds of them. Oh, but then you can break down a different legendary into a thing and then enchant it with it. Right? It's just like, oh my god, it's too much. Remember back when you could just like find really good items?
Yep.
And it was locked in, the same stats no matter what. And you're like, my build incorporates this unique item.
Well, so which reminds me, so Diablo 4, which is not a new game by the way, I bought it when it came out, played only in the story until my character was level 8.
Okay, that's not very far.
And then never picked it up again for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then this new expansion came out, and I could have just jumped in and played that, but me being me, I was like, nope, completionist, got to play the story. So now I've jumped back into the story.
Now you're level 9.
But what you just said about, well, the legendaries dropping like according to kind of what level you are. So these legendaries will drop all the time in a boss fight or whatever, and then I'll pick it up. It's like, oh, these are gloves, character level requirement 35, but they're okay now. But then it's like 3 levels from now, I'll have a blue item drop that's better,
right.
And it's like, well,
yeah, because like back in Diablo 2, you were level cap was 99,
right?
But there were items that required level 99. Like the highest level item required was like 85. Like it wasn't that high, but you'd still incorporate into your build items that required level 62.
Yep.
Level 45. Like a Nagel ring. No, Ravenfrost was one of the greatest rings in the game because it gave frost resistance, frost absorption, frost resistance, cap increase, and cannot be frozen.
Yeah.
That's an amazing ring.
Yep.
All those things are very painful to deal with. This ring, this old 45 ring.
Because most of the bosses could freeze you. Yeah.
And so it's like, well, I don't want a level 99 version of that. Like the level 45 one is fine.
Yep.
And I'm okay with that as a game design standpoint. And that was the original WoW too. Like I don't know if you ever played that, but there were for the level 60 people before you got to raids, even within raids, certain classes still relied on like items dropping from dungeons before the raids, and they were like requires level 49 out of 60. And it's like still best in slot item.
Yeah.
It's like you don't need a full set of level 60 max gear to be, like you don't need to design it that way.
In Diablo 4, you have to.
That's how it is designed now. But like you don't technically need to have designed it that way.
Right.
Like I can go farm lower level gear if it's still really good and it's unique and it does the best thing that I want it to do. It's just, I don't know. I kind of miss some of that aspect of it.
Yep. And I've, to be fair, I have not done the thing that you do in Diablo where the game doesn't actually start until you hit your max level, and then you go play multiplayer and start getting paragons. So I don't know what the gear is that's optimal, but I have noticed that it does drop kind of based on your level, and so it's immediately 2 levels later you find something that eclipses
if it's like enemy difficulty determines item level range. So it's like, I want this item that's level 45. I need to go farm Nightmare Act 4 to get the right level range for this item to drop. Then it's like, okay, well, that makes sense.
Yep.
But it's like, no matter what drops, no matter where you are in the game, the level of the enemy is always matched to yours, and the geared items are always the exact same level that you are right now. It's like, that doesn't give me anything to look forward to. That doesn't give me any incentive to, like, farm until I'm max level, because as soon as I hit max level, then it's like, okay, everything is as high as level as it can be. Yep. Like, I don't like when the point of the game is to get to the end. Excuse me. The point of the game is to get to the end and then you start playing.
Yep.
I like playing in the middle.
So do I.
You know what I mean? And Diablos have kind of fallen out of that a little bit.
Yep.
When we did our LAN party, we all played Diablo 2 Resurrected. There was a mad rush to get to the end of the game, and it's like, stop. Let's just play this.
Yeah.
Let's just slow roll it. Let's stop farming runes and getting rune words and putting it in like low-level items to be the best in slot until you level up to this level. It's like, I don't.
Oh, you found a shark skin one. You better hang on to that for when we go through the next difficulty of doing the same speed run.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
And so where did you guys go? We all went ahead already. It's like, well, I left behind.
Yeah, so, you don't want to socket it now. Wait until we get to the 4th run through, and then you go to Charcy, and then she does it. Like,
Yeah, I know.
And I think there's there is a fun element to that. If I want to do that, like just farming, then you grab your max level character and you get in a group with other max level people and you go.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, well, I want to run through this derpy story mode or just go on a run I want to run.
Optimal build. I want to go this weird, wacky build and level up this way and play and have fun playing this wacky build through.
Yep. And it's really not rewarding to that. It's not. So we came back to you to give you seconds on this to include this little bit.
But now it's that was a little taste of dessert. But speaking of,
but we got to go for seconds of dessert.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. We hope you enjoyed. Follow us for more of our weekly episodes on YouTube podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean. You can follow myself and Llama on Instagram. We are at Llama Paints Minis and Hyena Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.